Ring ring! It's time for another episode of Crossplay Conversations, the show where we dive deep into the world of video games while keeping it light. I'm your host, Luke Lewis, and this week I am joined, fresh off a tropical vacation, it's the Wii U Wonder Kid, Jacob McCourt.
Hi, I'm refreshed and ready to talk about video games.
I see a little bit of a tan there for this video game podcast.
Do you want to see my burnt legs? Because I'll show them on camera if you watch the video version.
Well, yeah, you got to pay for that.
Is that something we want? Or...
I'm not going to show my feet, but I can show my legs and how burnt they are.
Okay. Video viewers got a special treat? Question?
You got a sweet thigh.
And rounding out our trio, it's the sneaker savant, Joseph Hooper.
What's up, everybody? For like the 3rd or 4th episode in a row, I don't have a shoe to show you guys.
Man.
I don't even know.
Okay.
I don't even remember. The problem is, I don't even remember what shoe I've shown you guys. Rookie of the Years? Like
Last time it was Zebras.
I love the show.
Oh, okay.
That's a good shoe.
I don't know. The Rookie of the Years. I love them.
Classic. I feel like it's been we were talking about this before we started recording, but it's been a hot minute since we were all on an episode together because we pre-recorded some stuff. We had the Pacific Drive review. We had some different smattering of things, but it's good to be back with the crew. How's everybody doing?
I'm excited for PAX East, man.
Yeah, as of this recording, I'm flying out tomorrow.
Same.
So very excited to see everybody play games, hang out, enjoy good vibes. But we got some good vibes on today's podcast. We are celebrating one of our favorite game developers, Double Fine Productions, with today's episode. So this all culminated when Jacob came to visit me in San Francisco, and we went on a Double Fine themed bar crawl through the city. So we'll talk about that, but we'll also be digging into our favorite Double Fine games and also talk about the 32-part documentary Psych Odyssey, which I know we were all obsessed with last year and never talked about it on a piece of content. So this will be fun to dig into that a little bit. But let's kick things off with our icebreaker question. I want to talk about what makes Double Fine so unique within the games industry. I know it's a studio we've all followed for quite some time, have cherished memories of their games spanning different console generations. But what makes this studio tick? You want to kick us off, Jacob?
Yeah, I think that I think of Double Fine, and it's not really a fair comparison because like Pixar is now owned by Disney. I mean, I guess Double Fine's owned by Microsoft, but like I really think of them at the pinnacle of like making really fun and funny games. There are very few games that have made me laugh as much as some of like Double Fine's games. And then even when you think of like Pixar, like from shorts to full features, Double Fine has made games at all ends of the spectrum, from your, trenches and your costume quests all the way up to something insane like Psychonauts 2. And they're a small team too, so I just love them, man.
As you should. How about for you, Joseph?
Yeah, I definitely feel like them being around for so long and surviving as long as they have and staying small at the same time, very impressive. That alone is a feat in itself. But in addition to that, kind of going off of what Jacob says, like their strategies for creating games are a little unorthodox, and I think that makes for very, very interesting products. I just love that when they put out Psychonauts 2, they're the only people putting out a 3D platformer in that range outside of like Nintendo. And they're the only people who are kind of like committing to whatever vision, weird or not, that they want to put out there. So I think that's very exciting. Like, it's very rare that you see a team with such a sculpted vision bring it to life all the way and like not worry about what the trends are or anything like that. So I love them for that.
I think too, I think about them as like the perfect example of like the underdog within the games industry, because I can't think of another studio that's like almost failed or almost shut down as many times as Double Fine has, but they've always made it work and they've always found investors or support. And I know prior to their Microsoft acquisition, like it was a grind to find that funding for their games. But they were one of the studios that when they announced their Microsoft acquisition, that I was so excited for that team just to have some financial security, not have to worry about it, and have that have the resources to get weird with it. And that's kind of my favorite thing about their games is just like the weirdest, quirkiest, most interesting games out there. And I love that you called out the size and scale, Jacob, of like what other studio on their level of quality is making like tiny bite-sized experiences that can be beaten in a sitting or two to like fully fledged AAA experiences like Psychonauts 2. Like it's really cool to see. And I also feel like the they have a lot of celebrity friends, whether it's Elijah Wood or Jack Black. So I feel like their games almost like transcend like the gaming medium and kind of are like viewed as like big pop culture pieces too, especially like dating back to the adventure games and stuff. But special studio nonetheless, which is why we're devoting a whole episode to them.
Before you get too far, I do want to go back to something you said. You said what other studio has like faced closures and survived? And to the answer to that, I would say you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised like how many studios have run out of money.
I guess that we know about,
What I was gonna say to like, build off of that is like another big part of Double Fine is the transparency, right? Like they are, the only studio or one of the only studios that gives you as deep of a look into the process, in the games industry and the development process. I think that's why a lot of people love Double Fine, and not only because they love their games, but because they do put out all of these different documentaries regarding their development timelines and their game jams and stuff that give people like a newfound appreciation about the stuff that they actually did get to play from when it was finally done, which we don't get all the time, right? So that's another big aspect to it.
I know we're going to talk about it later, I'm sure, when we talk about Psych Odyssey, but if you just think of every pitfall that they could have fallen into of like Will Wright had to save them to make payroll one time, Starbreeze, executives got arrested, EA and Brutal Legend, not a successful project. And from my memory, like both sides sort of said that. And then like Microsoft dropped the original Psychonauts and Majesco had to come in and save them. So like just the lore that we have access to is incredible, and the transparency, as you said, is great. And they're a cat with 9 lives that I'm just like so glad still are around, because their vision for games I feel is still felt in the industry. Think about Day of the Devs. Like without Double Fine, Day of the Devs does not exist. And beyond their own development portfolio, they've also published stuff. Stuff like Kids, which is like a fantastic game. It's 20 minutes long and everyone should play it on their phone. You know what I mean? So shout out Double Fine, I guess.
Heck yeah. Well, let's get into, I think we should talk about this bar crawl that you and I and my fiance Claire did, Jacob, because that was what spawned this whole thing. So for listeners that are like, what the heck are you talking about? How did you do a bar crawl themed for this video game developer that we all know and love? So we first got this idea from a Game Informer video that was made by friends of the show, Alex Van Aken and Blake Hester. I'll link the video in the episode description if you want to check it out. But it was a video celebrating the 10th anniversary of Double Fine Adventure, which was the documentary focused on the development of Broken Age that they did along with their Kickstarter campaign. And so along with that, they had everyone meet at a dive bar in Chinatown and San Francisco called Red's Place, which Red's Place was the code name for Broken Age. And then Tim Schafer mentioned in that interview that every game made at Double Fine has a corresponding dive bar in Chinatown that is the code name for the given game. So once Jacob and I discovered this, we realized we should probably do this. Yeah. He was coming into town conveniently a couple of weeks later, so we planned this whole thing, and we had a really fun time. But so we'll run through this event because it's just so weird. It's like, how often do we have a segment on our video game podcast where we talk about this like IRL
San
random
Francisco
adventure
Chinatown bars? Are you
bars
ready?
Yeah. So where do you want to start, Jacob?
I mean,
with this
if
experience,
you're watching the video version on YouTube, you'll be able to see a very enthusiastic picture of one Luke Lewis standing in front of Red's Place. And I will tell you that this is easily my favorite bar. And sorry to blow it early, but
no, it's good.
Red's was the best bar. And it was really just because like inside very divey, but they had exterior patio that was not a traditional patio that I've ever seen. Cause again, for reference, like I'm from basically the Midwest, but in Canada. And so like having a bar like that where there's just like standing thin, narrow tables where there's just enough room for you to like put your beer in your hand and nothing else, was just such a vibe. And it was like a pergola that, fit with the vibe of Chinatown. And we were just sitting there enjoying, I think I was enjoying an Angry Orchard, and just like, man, it was nice outside. I'm like, this is a cool vibe. Thank you, Luke. Trip accomplished based on this only.
I think my favorite part about the experience was each bar we went to throughout the night. I think we went to four,
five? I think.
I think we drank beverages at 4, and then we like walked past another one.
Yep, you're right.
My favorite thing at each place was just kind of envisioning like the mindset of the dev team, or like, why was this the one that they codenamed, and thinking about like the different eras. Like one of my favorites, not because it was an establishment that I like absolutely loved being at, was called Lipo. And it was just this it was the diviest bar I've ever been to since college. I'm going to be honest. Like there was 2 levels. There was like couches everywhere. There was like a bodega liquor store in the basement
with a Bristol board with all the prices.
The bathroom to get to this second bar. Like it was just like the weirdest, like it was the most like, okay, you just turned 21 and you found a bar to go to bar. And that was the bar that was codenamed for Psychonauts. And so I could just envision like young Tim Schafer and company all being like young 20-somethings with $5 to $10 for drinks on a Friday night in that bar, coming up with this trippy acid game of Psychonauts.
I'm a 35-year-old man, and I got carted to go inside, so that's when you know.
Yeah, it was an experience. So Joseph, you have questions, so please question why we did this.
You answered my question, which was what game is Lipo, but I guess the follow-up question is drinks. Drink of the night. Do you have a drink of the night?
I think the drink of the night for me was at the very last bar we went to, which I don't see on this list, and I'm not sure if it was actually one of the bars, but it was across the street from one of the bars, and it was full, so we couldn't get into that one. But I had an Irish coffee that was very good. For folks that don't know what that is, it's coffee with Baileys, so it's this like coffee liquor beverage that it's a very nice nightcap. But I'm not a huge drinker, but it was a lot of just like Angry Orchard ciders or very basic beers at these dive bars. So it was like way less about the drinks and more just about the like taking in the vibe of like, what was Tim Schafer thinking about when he was drinking his beverage here? What level was he probably working on? Like, and kind of reminiscing about each of the games. That was kind of the highlight for me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I had a gin cocktail at this last bar at Tosca was the name of the bar. And it was easily the best thing because, like I said, I was drinking White Claws and Angry Orchards because my insides don't like beer. So this last bar was like, and it was an Italian restaurant, but also had a bar that, we went into, and I think not that we were underdressed, but like that we were just like, we're just going to be at the bar. The waitress was like, oh, okay, sure. You can sit at the bar. It's an Italian restaurant, but okay.
It was definitely a restaurant that was like classy enough that you would like take a anniversary dinner date or something to.
Yep.
Very different than Lipo and the other one. I think the other one that I really liked was Buddha, which is the Brutal Legend codenamed bar. Didn't really give me Brutal Legend vibes, but it was this like kind of smaller, quaint cocktail bar that looked like something out of like a Persona game. Yep, there's another picture of me with a painting of a Buddha statue.
It's a Buddha. That is a Buddha.
Buddha was a close second for me because it was a very small seating bar. It was like maybe there was
10, 15
I was going to say
most.
like 12 to 16 seats.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were like, there was a bar, but you could obviously sit on the seat either facing towards the bar or facing towards the back. And there was another set of seats that essentially there were people besides us that were just sitting like, imagine it's like a 6-foot sort of pathway, and there's people sitting on one end and people sitting on the other end and just sort of having a conversation. So it was cool. It was like it was a weirdly small bar that I just like, the vibe was good. We like good vibes.
That was one that I would like go to if it wasn't themed to, because it was like, it was a dive bar, sure, but I would say it was like the most chill.
Yeah.
Of all of them. What ones am I forgetting? What else did we go to?
I thought we only went to Reds, which is Broken Age, Buddha, which is Brutal Legend, Lipo, which is the original Psychonauts, and then Tosca, which we think actually isn't a Double Fine bar.
But I think it's right across the street from Vesuvio Cafe, which is the Once Upon a Monsters Sesame Street Connect game.
Yeah, that was bumping when we tried to walk in.
That one kind of gave me like French cafe vibes, which it's interesting. I think at a certain point, if we were to ask Tim Schafer about it, he would probably say like, well, we ran out of bars, so we had to, that had to be the next one.
Eventually jazz clubs is next. Comic book shops.
Right.
If they make
comic
more
book
games.
shops. There was a bookstore. Yeah. They'll be at the bookstore next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was really fun. I think the closing question for the bar talk is, would we recommend this to folks? As of this recording, like folks are at GDC right now, potentially this week. Would you recommend folks check this out in SF?
What
Jacob?
venue is San Francisco is GDC at? My thought is like, if it's a
it's at the Moscone Center. It's relatively close.
Okay.
2 minutes.
If it's the
Quick
Moscone
walk,
Center,
very short Uber.
Yeah, worth it. If it's because that's not quite Tenderloin.
No,
but that's
don't
like
go to
Union
the Tenderloin if you're listening to this and looking for places to go in San Francisco.
I think it's fun. It's a fun thing that if you're a fan of Double Fine's games, like just to check out sort of, vibes that helped form some of your favorite games. Absolutely, and the map is out there.
Love it. Yes. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I'll drop the Google Map link in the description as well for folks that are interested, but it was a fun time. But enough bar talk. Let's talk about games. So let's talk about everything that inspired our love of Double Fine. Let's kick things off with, what's your favorite Double Fine game and why? Maybe starting with you, Joseph. What comes to mind?
Yeah, that's pretty easy. Psychonauts 2 is my favorite Double Fine game.
Done. Lock it in.
I'm gonna out myself here and say I'm a fairly new Double Fine fan. Like, I've seen the documentaries. I think I saw the original. I can't remember, Broken Age stock like years ago. But in terms of games I've actually played, I played Psychonauts 1 just a couple months, like a month or so before the Psychonauts 2 release, which was back in 2018. So I think that was like my only like introduction to Double Fine. Like, I had seen Brutal Legend on Cheat and stuff, but the first games I actually played were the Psychonauts games. And Psychonauts 2 just kind of captured all of the magic that I had seen in documentaries, that I heard about from people talking about Tim Schafer and talking about games like Brutal Legend. And it just felt so pristine and polished, like no rough edges at all. It was funny. It felt great. It felt unique and different in that time that it came out. So, yeah, I mean, like, Psychonauts 2 still, in terms of 3D platformers, one of my favorites. Probably will remain one of my favorites for a really, really long time, especially when you exclude the Mario out of the conversation. Like, who's doing it any better than Psychonauts 2 in this generation? So, yeah, that's my long answer for you.
That's a great pick. I think that's probably mine as well. And we'll get into specifics about Psych Odyssey, but I think I only loved that game more after seeing everything that went into making it. And I think there's something really special about like a game that feels as good to play as Psychonauts 2, but then to have like the mental health commentary and things weaved into the story in what felt like a really natural, organic way that would be engaging to, folks of all ages, I think is really quite an accomplishment. And it's one that I constantly think about. That's like a regular, like, it's definitely in my top 10 of all time at this point, I would say, because I made that list earlier this year for a work thing, and so I had to break it down, and it was on the list. So yeah, definitely a very, very good game. I have one more game to shout out, but Jacob, I think you might be shouting out the game I was going to mention. Ooh. So I'll kick it to you next.
So I feel like I'm going to bring up a dark horse pick here. And my dark horse pick is let's not say a Psychonauts game and actually say Costume Quest.
Yes. Okay, you did it.
Yeah, I did it.
I did it. I was going to say.
I read your mind. Look at this forehead. With this forehead, I read your mind. Again, a video version. You get to see my forehead and my thighs today.
So much going on in the video.
So much skin. Costume Quest, I think, just like captured. It was obviously an Xbox Live Arcade game that came out in the 360 era, and it just captures Halloween, I think, in a way that very few pieces of media do. You play as kids who wear costumes and you roller skate around the neighborhood, collect candy, and then like do battles that like, I think the battles in themselves are like nothing to write home about. It's a very basic RPG system, but it's, an RPG that you can play through in like 4 to 6 hours. And it just like captures almost like the Peanuts vibe for Halloween. Like, I got an apple, I got a candy, I got a rock. Like that is what the spirit they've captured. And there are very few games that I think about with such reverie that I've played more than once. Even Psychonauts 2, I think, Costume Quest 2, I think is also good. I don't think it hits the same highs, even though the villain in that one is way better. Costume Quest is like a perennial hit that you need to play. Save it for October, though.
Oh, yeah. That's one that Claire and I played co-op like Halloween weekend. I think it was during the pandemic because we were like, oh, we can't really like go out or see friends or anything. Like, let's finally play this game. And it was such comfort food. And like it captured that like childhood thing of like, we're going trick-or-treating and we're putting on a costume. And then it like personifies of like, oh, you're turning into a giant Transformer robot. And like the scale of it is really fun for such a like tight, concise experience.
I still need to watch. There's a Channel Frederator show on Prime Video that's based on the Costume Quest IP. I have not watched it yet, and I feel like I've talked about it on at least one podcast before this, and I still haven't watched it. So I guess this is my cue that I finally need to frickin' watch that.
Right back.
Speaking of things
Yes, I'll be right back. Keep talking. I got my headphones on.
Yeah, you're good. I was going to say, speaking of things you want to do, I feel like with me, I have a couple Double Fine backlog games that I'm just like dying to play, but I have a hard time finding the time for. Like Brutal Legend, I'm sure I would really, really enjoy. I love Jack Black. I love that sense of humor. Mm-hmm. I love tower defense stuff. So the fact that there is a like core component of the game that involves tower defense that turned a lot of people off, that's like a selling point to me that sounds really interesting that I want to experience more of. And then Costume Quest 2 is another big one for me because I enjoyed the first one so much that it's like, how have I missed that? Are there any obvious Double Fine ones that you want to play?
Yeah, so I've started doing this thing every year where I've decided to do what I'm calling like backlog beats, because we know this. If we have like an impossibly long backlog list, we don't actually do anything about it. And like, hopefully I have a relatively long life of, 80 plus years. So like over my prime years, I can play like games that I've not played that like my soul needs. All those words to say, Brutal Legend is on my list of games that I'm going to play this year. So hopefully by end of year, I'll have a report on how is Brutal Legend. Nice. No More Heroes and Persona 4 Golden are the other two games on that list. But for me, it's that I want to play Iron Brigade / Trenched and the Russian nesting doll game. Stacking. Thank you. I want to play those two, even though they're quite they've aged quite a bit, I'm sure, at this point. And then look, if there's time, stuff like Massive Chalice, I'd just love to touch it. I don't need to play through it, but
I was glancing through their catalog, and there's a few of these games that I didn't even realize released.
Space DF1. Have you played that one?
Have you played Middle Manager of Justice?
I have. That's an iOS game. Yeah.
Is it cool? It looks kind of cool. Okay.
It was sick. Cool. It was like almost a precursor to Fallout Shelter. Without the shelter piece, but like same vibes.
Same thing about Rad. I didn't realize Rad had come out, but it's available on like all modern consoles and things.
Rad unfortunately
Switch came out in
get reviewed in the best way, but it's still a Double Fine game.
Okay. I like the art style, but I also could say that about every Double Fine game.
I mean, it's unfortunate about Headlander with the news of Adult Swim Games deciding to delist everything because WB sucks.
Oh, shoot.
Headlander
I hadn't thought about that with that game, though.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. WB sucks. Should I say it more into microphones? Probably, right?
They do suck.
Yeah.
They do suck. Strong contender for Business Boy, a bit of bad
Yeah,
business.
Zaslav can take a hike. You heard it here first.
Agreed. Joseph, how about for you? Are there any big Double Fine games on your backlog that you hope to get to one day?
I mean, if I'm being honest, the backlog is ever growing and almost impossible to tackle. So probably not. Like, honestly, if I just start playing Costume Quest on a whim, that would be the one, because I never got to play Costume Quest. And same with like Day of the Tentacle and Full Throttle and stuff. But yeah, I don't think so, but yeah.
On the bright side, all of those aren't terribly long, so it's like conceivable, like they could happen. It's not like we're like, no offense, Jacob, but with your or what did you say, a Persona 4 Golden pick, I'm like, I hope you do, but man, is this year like crazy for 70+ hour RPG, etc.
I think you can do that one in 50.
Really? Okay. I mean, that's still 50, but it's a good game. It's definitely a good game.
It's still 50.
Closing out the game talk, what's a project you'd like to see Double Fine tackle? Whether it's an existing IP, a sequel to something they made previously, or like a completely different genre. What do you want to see them approach with their next project?
Am I allowed to say Psychonauts 3? Is that too easy? Is that too
allowed,
much of a label?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the obvious answer. As the person who's only played the Psychonauts games and loves Psychonauts 2, I would love to just get a Psychonauts 3. But if not that, I would just love to see like a new single player adventure from the ground up, like something I couldn't even predict. I think Psychonauts is completely out of left field when you talk about these kids going to psychic camp, and then there's this whole thing that spawns out of it when they're essentially in high school in Psychonauts 2. All that's cool, and that's unlike any other game out there. So who knows what's in Tim Schafer's minds, or even some of the other people at the team. I'm sure they have great ideas too. I would just love to see them go left field again with a big, expansive adventure.
I dig that.
I'm in the mind of, I want to see almost the opposite of Joseph, where I want to see like, I want the era of 3 small games again, where I want like Costume Quest, Iron Brigade, and stacking, like sort of bam, 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 like year. I'd love to see that. I just trust that whatever they come up with is going to be wild. I mean, we've seen some of the not rejected, but like the pitches for Amnesia Fortnite that didn't make it through. Like there's just an insane amount of creative energy there that whatever they decide to work on, is it Kiln that they're finally going to put out? Maybe. But if I had to say there's an IP I want them to jump on now that they're part of the Microsoft family, Banjo-Kazooie or Conker's Bad Fur Day would be like,
that'd be very
imagine
cool.
Tim Schafer
with the
writing
humor
Conker.
And writing too. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Crazy, yeah.
Letting him be raunchy like that, like, come on now.
I feel like that's something we didn't really get into too, but just like the sense of humor in every Double Fine game is just like impeccable writing, impeccable vibes, just so good. Yeah, I want both of those things. I want a big Double Fine game, and then I also want a small Double Fine game. For like the health of the studio and the employees, which we'll dig into here in a moment with Psych Odyssey talk, I'd like to see some smaller titles.
Yeah.
In Psych Odyssey, they hint that Kilm is in somewhat full production. I would love to play that game. I think a multiplayer game from Double Fine would be really fun, especially like a smaller project. I'd also see them love to tackle another classic point-and-click adventure game coming off of Broken Age. I really love Broken Age, and I think there's still a lot of fun things you can do with the genre. And while it wasn't a Double Fine game, the most recent Monkey Island game I thought was really excellent as well. So like, I think that genre still has some juice left, and I would love to see Tim Schafer tackle like a new world, a new IP, a new approach, and see where they take it. And it could be a really concise like Costume Quest, like a 4 to 6 hour type experience, and I'd be really happy with that.
I think that, and guys, keep me honest here, I think that Pendleton Ward, who often collaborates with them, has not done a full project with them yet, right?
I don't think so.
Imagine like a Pendleton Ward animated, Tim Schafer written, like essentially Cartoon Network game as show or show as game. There's 1,000. Just like yeah.
Ooh, going off of that, I just had a thought. What's Tim Schafer's immortality?
Ooh.
You know what I mean? Of like, not necessarily that like, like graphic, let's say, but just like, what's his like mind place version of like digging deep into like, I imagine like an FMV adventure weird art piece thing. I think that could be cool.
I think it's a big Atari 2600 person, so imagine if it was like in the vibe of a 2600 game.
That'd be cool.
I just want them to make stuff. Cool. Like whatever they make, I'm in for, you know?
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I just want weird stuff. I want stuff that is not normal.
Speaking of not normal, let's talk about Psych Odyssey, the 32-part documentary that we all watched last year about the making of Psychonauts 2, made by Two Player Productions, filmed over the course of 7 years. I believe they had over 5,000 hours of footage that they whittled down to be, I think it was like roughly 27 hours of footage. I'm trying to remember. This is all off the dome, but let's talk about it. We've talked about it a lot as we were watching it, but high level, what did you guys think of Psych Odyssey? What does it mean to you? Maybe kicking it off with Joseph.
Yeah, I mean, Psych Odyssey will probably forever be one of the greatest video game documentaries we'll ever get. Not only is it a cool look into this company who does things unorthodox, like their meetings, like the people there, everything about the company is just unique and quirky, and it feels very indie when you think about like an indie company. But also it is not, I mean, I'm sure it's filtered at some points, but it is way less filtered than pretty much anything we've ever seen from any other company. Like we see the struggles, we see the stuff that's getting cut, we see the roadblocks, we see, business changes both on a very high level and on a individual employee level. Yeah, I mean, like, if you really want to understand what a look into game development is, like, I don't know if you get anything better than this. So yeah, this is very special, like, especially for how many hours of content that we got, and to see such a unique project evolve over time like this one. Like, I would love to see how Fortnite is getting made, or, Halo Infinite or whatever, but like, especially when you have a game that's just so different than everything else, to be able to see this process take place, and especially when the team is not guaranteed to ever see this game release. Yeah, I mean, it's just magnificent in every way. I love it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to get very hyperbolic as we're talking about this and say a lot of things that I firmly believe, but I would go as far to say as like, it's my favorite documentary. Whoa. Like, transcending video games. And I like a good documentary. I watch a fair bit of documentaries, and I just think there's something really special about the level of transparency and access that the Two Player Productions team had, and just the candidness of everybody on the team. And you see things that your average PR team probably wouldn't want you to see. And I think there's something really special about that. And I think that contributes to this love of Double Fine that we all have. What are your thoughts, Jacob?
I often, as a business boy who does business, think of how they showed us a meeting with Matt Booty. I bet you there were meetings about whether or not that would get cut or not, because just that piece of it alone, having them been acquired by Microsoft and having a fireside with Matt Booty where they ask very direct questions about especially stuff like, hey, what about my side projects? And Matt Booty gives an answer that is like, hey, I don't know, is just absolutely wild to see that there's no veneer there. And that's shit you don't get. So for whoever sat there and fought for that specific moment to be in the video, thank you, because it's nice to see folks in the games industry like get rid of the veneer. Like sometimes business isn't perfect. Sometimes executives don't have all the answers, and we got to see that there. And it sort of makes Matt Booty and executives at Microsoft seem more human, despite all the things that have happened there with layoffs.
Yeah, totally.
It's just kind of crazy. Like it's such a snapshot in time where literally we'll never get to see all of the things that we see in this documentary ever again. Like we see an acquisition, like we literally see a company pre-acquisition and then post-acquisition. We get to see the team dealing with that news. We get to see COVID, and we get to see them adapting to COVID in full detail. Like it's really kind of like, sure, it is a fantastically shot documentary, but it is also just like a product of time that cannot be replicated, right? So that's also an aspect that makes this so special.
We get to see stuff from like the highs of some of the first employees discovering that they have equity in the company and that the equity has to get paid out and that they're getting a payday from the Microsoft purchase, all the way down to the stuff that happened with, and it's always weird to talk about human beings, but like what happened with the producer that was on the project that, you know, is no longer on the project and no longer part of the company.
Yeah, it is this weird thing of like they become characters almost as we're watching, even though they're very much real people experiencing real turmoil and real success and real, you know, jubilant moments and everything in between. But it's also I'm curious, how fast did you guys consume this? Because I think I watched it in about 2 weeks. It was pretty quick because I just like I couldn't stop. And I know, Joseph, you and I were texting of like, did you get to this episode so then we could finally talk about X moment and things? And it was like the most like water cooler conversation I've ever had about a documentary.
Yeah, I remember watching it, and I remember like starting the first couple episodes. I was like, oh, these are like an hour plus long each episode. And I remember Amanda was like, are you about to watch all of this? I'm like, I'll watch it over the course of like a month or two. And then like literally like a week later I was done, and I was like, dude,
you were texting me like, are you on episode 8? I'm like, what the hell?
I was deep, man. This was like all I was consuming for a week straight, and I'd do it again. I watch it all again.
I've almost watched it again multiple times. It has happened. Yeah.
Jamie, yeah, I watched like the first dozen episodes, and I was a big fan of Double Fine Adventure. I was actually a backer and was watching it sort of episode by episode back from Broken Age, which was sick.
Nice.
I often show the clip of Elijah Wood lifting a bag of Rice Krispie treats that he made going into the VO booth. I show that video probably once a year for reasons. But I watched about the first 12 episodes of this thing, and I fell off hard, where I was just like, you know, there's other stuff going on. There's other stuff I'm going to watch. There's other stuff I want to play. It just didn't really grab me. Obviously, I loved like the first couple, but then the episodes in the 8, 7, 8, 9, 10 sort of just lost me a little bit. And then you guys got so excited about that I'm like, hey, if both of my friends are like, yo, this thing's sick, like maybe I need to give it a shot. And I think after it took me a little bit to get back into it, but once I got into the teens, I just didn't stop. So I probably watched the back half like in 2 weeks.
I think I had the flu, and so I think I watched like episodes like 10 through 25 like in a matter of days. Just like I was like, I can't do anything else, so I guess I'm watching this, and I think that helped. But it's an emotionally like it's a roller coaster, and it's like I felt for a lot of those people, and it's such a wild experience, and I can only imagine like having been on that team what it would be like to then watch back like what potentially was the most like difficult years of your career,
especially for people who are no longer at the studio.
I'm curious, we've kind of hinted at the fact that we don't think this is going to ever happen again to this scale. Like we'll have other 2-player productions, we'll have other video game documentaries, you know, we have folks like Alex Van Aken or the No Clip team like doing great work out there, but to be embedded in a studio for years on end and experiencing these like major cultural events like COVID or the Microsoft acquisition, that said, what do you think is the lasting impact of this documentary in terms of industry impact?
I wonder if this thing's going to be shown in classrooms, or at least like parts of it will be shown in classrooms, because that's where my mind goes. There are other docs that are out there. You've alluded to No Clip. They did a documentary for Hades that is out there, but they are not embedded in the same way, because it's like they'll go for a visit once a month, just strictly from like a resource perspective.
Sure. Totally.
It'll be shown in classrooms. I fear we'll never get it again. Just because I don't think Double Fine will make a game that takes them 7 years ever again, knock on wood. But I'm very thankful for it.
Totally.
Yeah. I think, it's very unlikely we'll get anything like this again. I hope we do. I hope there's some studio out here that is inspired by this project and wants to do something similar. But, it is very expensive to have somebody full-time recording everything you do. Yeah, and a lot of
it ended up being 4 people in the end total.
It was basically a full camera crew, and I think this is almost survivorship bias, because there's a lot of studios that try and make games and they don't do as well. So. Like, sure, you spend 5 years recording a game and your game either doesn't release or it's a flop. Like, that's tough, right? So it'll be interesting. Like, also making games is evolving and is very different than it was when Double Fine started this project. So who knows? But I really, really do hope we get something somewhat similar.
Yeah. I hope, if anything, we just see a greater push for transparency, and it's a weird time to hope for that, because I feel like the games industry is just literally on fire amidst layoffs and the lack of just like stability for teams. So it's a weird time to demand transparency, but I also think it's an important time for transparency, because I think I for these studios that are struggling, the ones that are kind of still successful in my mind, even if they are struggling, are the ones that are openly talking about it. I think about, I was just listening to the Indie Council hosted by friend of the show, Joe Grote, today, and they were chatting about Scaffold Studios.
Xavier Nelson is exactly the person I was thinking about.
Yeah, where it's like, he strikes this amazing balance, and I recommend everybody go listen to their latest episode, but he strikes this amazing balance just talking about like pushing towards transparency and how folks kind of doubted him and his studio in terms of what they could do and what they could sustain in terms of business, and they've shown that like they can be a sustainable studio for folks. They can put out multiple projects within a reasonable amount of time. And I think that also goes into the whole conversation that also has been strengthened by the recent Academy Awards and folks calling for smaller budgets and approve films, or in our case, games for less money. And I hope that there's a lot of positive impact around this documentary.
Just quick aside on that episode, I think Xavier had a definition of indie that I am gonna find a way to maybe clip and post, because I think it's the best definition of indie. It's really good. Keep me honest here, but it's like the definition of indie is like the developers themselves have something fundamentally at risk. So instead of talking about like scope or whether you're owned by a publisher or not, like you fundamentally have something at risk where if this game does not land, you may not make another game again. His TikTok's great. You should just follow that. I just want to see what they make. More transparency, please. We ain't gonna get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged sword too, because like transparency is nice, but also, you open up yourself for criticism, right? So, you are transparent and you say, hey, we were trying to do this thing and it wasn't fun and we cut it. And now all the fans are like, well, you should have did this. We need this. Or we want this. Right. So, and also Double Fine as a team is very lucky that, all the people there, they have a lot of camera personable people there. Some people just don't want a camera at their work all of the time, like recording and documenting all of their toughest moments. So yeah, it's just like so many different factors that come together, which just make me believe, I can't believe this actually happened the way it did. But yeah, I agree. I do want transparency. I want to know as much as possible. Similar to the movie industry where we're seeing set photos, we're seeing casting announcements when we know everything about dang near Dune 3 before they even announced the movie, right? So like I would love that on the video game side, but also there is a certain level of magic as well. There you go. Look at the Dune 3 cup right there in his home. He's already seen Dune 3. But there is a certain
Another
level
shout
of
out
magic.
to the video version of the pod, I'm telling you.
But does he have the popcorn bucket?
I feel like, yeah, do you?
No.
I want to put my hand on that in that
due
real
time,
bad.
in due
Go ahead,
time.
Joseph. Sorry.
What the hell was I talking about?
I'm so sorry. You were making a really sort of salient point, and we just derailed.
There is some sort of magic about just not having transparency sometimes. For the people that sometimes you don't want the transparency. I remember when I got God of War Ragnarok 2018, and I was just like, what? Like I was almost media black. I didn't give a damn about God of War before that game came out, and I played it, and I was like, holy shit! Like that, I could have never imagined in my wildest dreams it would be that type of game. So I'm kind of glad I didn't get that spoiled for me, and they kind of had a chance to do that all under wraps. Another thing is the Fallout 3 moment where they announced it at E3 and was like, actually, yeah, it's ready to go this fall. And everybody was like, holy shit, I can't believe this is happening. Those moments are sick. Unfortunately, those moments don't really happen anymore. Anyways, it's kind of like, all right, this game, we're going to announce this game is coming out 8 years later. So that's just kind of what we have to deal with right now.
I think that's almost too because of like the scale of these games that we're talking about, of like they have to announce them in order to like get that shareholder price up and get that funding for these games that are going to take 8 or 9 years to develop. And it's just crazy. I don't know. I almost don't need transparency in terms of like, this is when the game, well, more so transparency about just like studio culture, or like, we canceled this project and it was because of these reasons. Or like recently with the Naughty Dog cancellation of The Last of Us multiplayer, I actually thought that was handled quite well with that internal memo they put out. If you guys remember, it was essentially like basically stating that like it came down to the wire where the game wasn't quite there and they needed to invest either all of their resources and stop making single player games or keep making that game. And they made the decision to keep making single player games. And everybody was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. But you're right, Joseph, that transparency also is a double-edged sword of not every decision will be that clear cut and folks can get pushback. And
I think of the films industry and how everything has like anything that comes out is perfectly manicured, fits within the PR plan. If an on-set video comes out, it's because they want promotion. So I think the video game industry, unfortunately, is going to like move in that direction. So in addition to not getting any information, we're just going to get live service games that are based on existing IP. So prepare yourself. Doom and gloom today, guys. Sorry. Do pop our bucket. Let's put our hands in it.
It's not doom and gloom. We talked about Psychonauts 3. All right. Let's make it happen, everybody. Let's make it happen.
I don't think it can be doom and gloom. Yeah, when we're talking about the greatest documentary, the greatest piece of art, games, media thing, like one of my favorite things, one of my favorite studios. But yeah, no, the game, but that's the thing, is the games industry is in this weird place, and it is this double-edged sword of like games we love, people that make them are struggling. So I don't know. I think it's a fair thing to have a kind of balanced conversation of both. So I think that's what we did here today. Any other Double Fine things for the good of the order, everybody?
No, I don't think so.
All good. I think that brings us to a close. All right. Well, thanks everybody. For those of you that are attending PAX, look forward to seeing you soon. We'll have some fun content coming out of the show, talking about all the cool games we played. Looking forward to that. But until then,
I'd love to promote a panel that I'm putting together at PAX. So if you are at PAX,
please. Thank you.
Sunday, 12:30 in the PAX 2 theater. I'm going to find the name in 1 second, but doing a panel about the Nintendo DS. Have a wonderful panel of people who are going to do a little retrospective. Essentially, we do like a speed retrospective, and then we open the mic up to the crowd and say, what are the 15 best games on this system? It is decided in this room forever. So we've done it before for the GameCube, for the GBA, and now we're doing it for the DS. And again, that will be featuring CG Danny B, Jenny Wyndham, Scott White, Brendan Groom, Dave Jackson. That is in the Albatross Theater on Sunday, March 24th at 12:30. And if you aren't at PAX, you can check it live at PAX 2, so twitch.tv/PAX2. And if you can't make either, well, sorry about your luck. I mean, there'll be a VOD later, so you'll be fine. But hope to see you there.
Awesome. We'll be there. Looking forward to it. And until then, we are setting our status to away. But please do 3 things for us. You can follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos. You can send this podcast to a friend because that's how people hear about podcasts. And lastly, you can give us a review on your podcast platform of choice because it really, truly does help. And as Tim Schafer would say, don't ask Will Wright for money.
Don't put your hand in the Dune 2 popcorn bucket unless you mean it.
I do mean it.